Well, today, in case you're shocked by it, we're going to talk about change. I have a question. What things in your life have you tried to change but found it difficult? You wanted to change something and you just didn't happen quite that easily. It was kind of a struggle. There's all the common things people have. They want to lose weight, eat more healthfully, exercise, maybe start a business, earn a college degree, build better relationships with their family, their husband, their wife, their children. In the church, sometimes we want to get closer to God, to be more in love with Him. Today, I'm going to talk to you about a story by a guy by the name of Sam. Sam has a lot of changes in his life coming up. And as we go through the story of Sam, I'd like you to think back on the changes you've tried to make in your life or you've already made and see what things are similar and maybe some differences. Sam, he learns several things as he goes through this time. He learns 4 universal stages of change. He learns one deadly lie. This lie is so powerful that if we believe it, change becomes almost impossible in our lives. On the other hand, if we learn God's truth, change is almost limitless. There is almost no limit to what potential we have. There's also one crucial turning point in all this, and 3 challenges to change. Finally, there's one key to supercharging change. With this key, we don't have to limit ourselves to just our abilities anymore. We start with Sam. Sam was feeling incredibly guilty. Why was he feeling guilty? Why was he feeling ashamed? You see, Sam had been to church a couple of weeks before, and the pastor had talked about priorities, about what's most important. And he had issued the church a challenge. I want you to list out all the things you spend your time on for a whole week. We're going to set aside work because we know everybody has to spend a big chunk of time on work. But list out all the other things you spend your time on and list out all the things you spend your time on related to God. Well, Sam had done that. You see, and Sam had always told himself and other people that God was his priority. But when he took a look at his list, he was embarrassed. You see, he had a lot more time for TV than he did for Bible study. A lot more time hanging around with friends than going to church. Way more time with sports and praying. In fact, if you added all the time up that he spent with God, it was still less than what he spent just playing video games. Sam knew that he needed to change. He started thinking about it, and then thinking about the possibility of change, he entered the first stage of change. Thinking about it. Sam had several thoughts about it. First of all, he thought perhaps if I'm praying every day, I would feel closer to God. And maybe if I read my Bible, maybe I would understand God a bit more. But then on the other hand, my life is just busy. No idea how many things I got to pack into a day. This is just crazy. I don't know if I can do this. And then again, his friends. What would his friends think if he started spending less time with them? Sam's thoughts about for change and against change are actually a normal part of human nature. Whenever we face a decision to change something in our life, we usually have that. We usually have all these reasons to why maybe change would be good, and then we have but what if, and all these things on the other side. That feeling 2 ways about change, that's a crucial turning point. That feeling 2 ways about it is often called ambivalence. There's 2 things that can happen when we're ambivalent. We can get stuck there. It's sort of like going down a street and with a bunch of houses, and you come to the end of the road, they have like a cul-de-sac, it's a little circle at the end. If we just never resolve those questions in our minds against change is sort of like going down the cul-de-sac and turning round and round and round and round. We keep thinking about it, we keep thinking about it, but we don't go anywhere. We need to answer those questions. When we answer those questions, when we resolve them in a way that is satisfying to us, then the other option is we can move forward with change. Well, with Sam, he managed to handle his ambivalence pretty well. He deliberately decided to face those objections in his own mind instead of trying to ignore them and kind of pretend they weren't there. The first one he thought about was, well, I'm too busy. Yeah, I am very busy. But I still managed to find time for TV and sports. And you know, if I want to get closer to God, I really do think that's probably a more important thing. So you know what, I think I can give up a little bit of time with the TV and a little bit of the sports time, and yeah, that's okay with me. One down. Number 2, friends. Now that was a bit harder for Sam. You see, his friends were really important to him, and not only were they important to him, but he, like many of us, really cared about what his friends thought about him. Their opinion of him was very important, and he didn't want to do anything that would risk them thinking badly of him. As he thought about it some more, then a thought popped into his head. Magically? No, probably not. God has a way of doing things like this. Thought popped into his head, and he said, whose opinion matters most? My friend's opinion or God's opinion? Well, as soon as he asked the question, the answer was so obvious. Only God's opinion determines his eternal destiny. Finally, Sam had resolved his ambivalence, and he's ready to move on. He got out of the cul-de-sac of ambivalence, and he went on to the next step, next stage of change. Planning. Planning and preparation. When we plan, in Sam's case, he had a plan. He wanted to get closer to God. Good morning. And so he had a plan to do that. He realized he needed to read more of the Bible. And so he thought, I'm going to do it. He wanted to start out with a big bang. So what did he do? He chose to read 2 books of the Bible, 2 entire books of the Bible in 1 week. Every single week. And he wanted to make sure he didn't cut God out on the prayer time, because he realized he'd really been doing that. You know, what we saw earlier before, he was missing a lot. So he wanted to make sure he prayed both morning and evening. That was his plan. As soon as he started thinking about making that plan, Sam started getting excited. He started seeing a change in his life and started thinking about what it might be like. He started thinking about the Bible characters whose lives had changed dramatically. He remembered Saul. He was an enemy of God. He was persecuting God's disciples. He was killing them, in fact. And in one fell swoop, he went from an enemy to one of the greatest apostles in all time. Then he thought about David. David, after all, started life as a shepherd. And then God made him king. Sam thought a lot about that. I wonder what God would make me. There were many others too. But then Sam started daydreaming about how God might use him. What great plans God might have for him. Maybe God would speak to him directly, kind of like God spoke to Moses. Or perhaps he would send Sam as a missionary to some foreign exotic country. But then again, maybe God was going to use Sam to baptize thousands of people. All these different thoughts played through Sam's mind. As the week progressed, it almost seemed like it was going too slow. Finally, he got to Sabbath, went to church. After church, he came home eager, cracked open his Bible, and started reading immediately. 2 hours later, Sam had entered the next stage of change. Action. He was doing it. He'd planned it out. He'd thought about it. He'd planned it. And now he was ready to take action. He was in the middle of doing it. However, it only took a little bit of time, 2 hours, for things to, how shall we say, become slightly challenging. You see, Sam had an older version of the Bible. And all these these and thous and thou shalts and all that kind of were a little difficult for him to understand. But on the other hand, Sam was the kind of guy, when he made a promise, he stuck to it. So he forged ahead. He kept his promise, and he read his Bible on Sabbath and Sunday and Monday. And then Tuesday came along. But Tuesday was a really hard day at work. There was a whole bunch of stuff going on. And by the time he got home, he was just exhausted, and his brain was just barely able to function and just try and forget some of the stuff that had been going on. And Sam clicked on the TV, as usual. Without realizing it, Sam had run into one of the 3 challenges to change. You see, when we have old habits, they have a momentum of their own. Turning on the TV after he got home from work, that's what Sam had always done. So the moment that he forgot his promise, he went right back to old habits. Ding! It's a little bit like a bowling ball down a bowling alley. If you get a good strong guy, throw that ball down the alley, it goes straight wherever it's headed. Even when it hits the pins, and if the guy is really bad, even if it crosses the gutter and into the other lanes, it pretty much just keeps rolling the same direction. Our habits are the same way. Once we start them, once we get used to them, it's difficult to change direction. That's closely related to the other 2 challenges. If we're going to change direction, guess what? It takes effort. It just doesn't happen spontaneously. Imagine this. Let's say you're a person who hasn't gotten much exercise. You've been sort of a couch potato. You know, your major exercise is from the refrigerator to the couch and back. But you decide you want to get really healthy and you're going to do a marathon in 6 months. You know how much effort it's going to take you to get your butt out, running around the block once, twice, 3, 5, 10. Oh yeah, I'm hurting already. Huge amount of effort. Sometimes that's what change requires. Inevitably, when we change direction, when we put effort into things, we end up in a situation where we feel uncomfortable. Why? Simply because it's different. If we change something, we're not in the same pattern we were before. We're out of our comfort zone. It's uncomfortable. Well, Sam woke up the next morning and all of a sudden realized, oh, I forgot. He was feeling bad. Kind of feeling like he'd been a loser and, not kept his promise. But then, he even tried to pray about it. But these thoughts just kept coming in his head about how he had promised and how he had fallen back into old habits, and it became really difficult to pray. But then he looked through his Bible and thought, well, you know what? I still got a few days left. Maybe I can catch up and I can finish Exodus by Sabbath. And so that's what he held on to. And he decided he was going to do that. So the next evening when he came home, started reading again. And the next evening. When he got to Friday, however, he glanced through the Bible. You see, he hadn't really looked ahead. Tried to figure out how much further he had to go. Sam wasn't a speed reader, okay? And all of a sudden he realized he still had 2/3 of the book of Exodus to go. It became very, very clear he wasn't going to make it. Now, Sam was about to learn the deadliest lie that has ever been told. If you believe this lie, change becomes almost impossible.